Hi everybody. Sorry about that. Starting out today, Thursday, April 16th. The dogs are all keyed up. So dogs were just outside. It was very exciting. They've run out to the backyard since. Sorry about that. Cough's not quite gone. Hope everybody's having a good day. We are starting with chapter 34. And all is well here. Found fresh strawberries, feeling pretty good about the day. Made my first mask last night. Actually went pretty well. Hope everybody else is having a good day. Hello to Diane and Nancy and Mike and Grace and anyone else who's joined us. And let's get started. Sorry about that. I will try not to cough through the whole thing. Hi, Grace. Okay, chapter 34, and we're almost to the end of the book, so we'll be starting a new one soon, so that's exciting. Lyra sat in the large room of the Garden Grove Ranch in Buda, watching her grandmother fuss over her mother, who was dressed in a long, cream-colored wedding dress and a ring of roses atop her head. They were in a large villa getting ready for Erica's wedding to Don, at last. 2 weeks had passed since the battle on the streets of Paris, and Lyra was still numb from the losses. She was grateful to have Korik next to her when she tried to sleep, jerking away in the night, replaying the last moments as she curled up next to him, feeling his even breasts next to her. She tried not to think of Param's anguished face as his father came to take his son home. Param looked up at Lyra as he stepped through the portal, and she reached out to him, but he turned away in pain. "It's not your fault, Lyra." Korik wrapped his arm around her, grateful she was safe, even as he mourned for Sonia and Param, swallowing hard to hold back his grief. General Anderson had cleaned up the streets and sent out a press release about terrorists and heavy losses, suppressing any reports of crazed wolves or strange beings with wands. But this time the rumors persisted, despite his efforts. Still, he had ordered Lyra to say nothing. Alan Cohen and his team were given medals posthumously that would be buried with each of them in order to keep the secrets. After their hastily arranged funeral, Lyra turned in her resignation. In the end, Hagen did the same, settling in at the sanctuary and volunteering his services to Lyra if she ever needed them. "Once a partner, always a partner," he had said, gently patting her shoulder. Still, today was her mother's wedding day, and she had managed to keep the news from her all this time. She was determined not to slip now. Let her have this day. Lyra took a deep breath and smiled at her mother. It was easy to do. Erica Behrens was so happy, turning around in her dress and touching the roses in her hair, the engagement ring sparkling in the light. "I'm so glad the two of you are walking me down the aisle. It's just perfect." Erica's joy was bubbling over. "Look, even your father sent a gift." Erica held out a pale blue, finely woven handkerchief with an embroidered bee on it. "The note says it's an artifact that brings joy to the one who holds it. It's my something old." "Oh, thank you. I was a little concerned that was going to be my role." Mara winked at her daughter as Erica let out an easy laugh. Lyra smiled and stood up, silently thanking her dad. "I will need to go see him soon. Maybe I can tell him everything that's happened. I'll be right back." Mara looked over at Lyra, her eyes narrowing as she studied her granddaughter, but she said nothing, instead smiling at her daughter and taking her hand. Lyra found her way outside and went out to the lawn where the guests were waiting, their chairs all turned toward the trellis at the end of the aisle, covered in vines and long, billowing white curtains draped on the sides. Lyra stood back in the shadows and pulled in energy from the ground, grateful to be using it for something to make someone she loved happy. She set out an intention and smiled as small blooms appeared on the vines and the scent of lilacs wafted across the grounds. The air glittered with flecks of gold in the sunlight as the guests all felt a lightness of being, and couples reached out for each other's hand, and friends smiled and laughed. Lyra made her way back to the room and held open the door. "It's time, Mom. You look beautiful, even radiant. I don't know that I've ever seen you this happy." Erica Behrens stepped down from the small platform she'd been standing on in front of the full-length mirrors and held out her arms, bent at the elbows. Mara put her hand through one side as Lyra came and did the same on the other, and the three Behrens women made their way outside together. They paused at the back of the aisle, waiting for the music to start and everyone to stand. Lyra took the bouquets from the wedding planner and handed the smaller one made of magnolias to her grandmother, and the larger one with trailing green vines to her mother, keeping another smaller one and holding it in front of her waist. Ready? She looked at her mother, who smiled and kissed her daughter on her cheek. Erica nodded, and Lara gave her arm a gentle squeeze as they set off down the aisle. Tony and Jack were seated together, and Turner Underwood was right next to them. All of the regulars were bunched up near the front, waving and cheering, just like they had done at the bar for years. Estelle sat on the aisle, an unlit cigarette dangling in her mouth as she dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Lear saw Coric standing tall in the front next to Don, dressed in a black tuxedo, his long silver hair hanging down past his shoulders. She smiled at him as Mara looked between the two of them and leaned across her daughter to whisper, "Well, it's about time." Erica looked up, surprised, and smiled, crinkling her chin. "Thank goodness. I thought you two would never catch on." Lyra felt her face warm and whispered out the side of her mouth, "Today is all about you, Mom. When you're a parent, it's never completely about you. You'll see someday. Okay, enough. We're almost to your groom. Be the bride for now." They got to the top of the aisle, and Lyra and Mara took turns hugging Don and Erica as they stepped back. Lyra went and stood next to Coric, taking his hand, grateful he was there. He squeezed her hand, and she felt the comfort of his energy surrounding her as she watched Erica and Don exchange their vows. "My family grows a little bigger today. Despite everything, this is another good day. I can take this in." Coric, I'm sorry about the clearing the throat. Boy, that's probably going to just continue right now. Coric leaned over and whispered, "Where's Yumfuck?" Lyra smiled, letting out a laugh. He said he had something he needed to do for Mom. I suppose we'll find out what that means soon enough. The minister looked up and held his arms out wide, smiling. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Don dipped Erica backward and said, "I've waited a very long time to be able to do this." He kissed his new wife as the crowd cheered, and Lyra's last surprise rose out of all the bushes. Hundreds of butterflies took flight, rising in the sunlight and hovering for a moment over the wedding as the guests looked up in surprise, gasping in amazement. 2 white doves came and settled in the front of the trellis, letting out soft coos as the bride and groom smiled and ran down the aisle, clutching each other's hand. Don and Erica waited till all the guests were gone before stepping through a portal to the sanctuary in Orsaren to spend their honeymoon. The gardener of the dark forest had set up a cottage deep in the wood, away from anything else. Yumfuck had gone ahead and spread the word among all his thousands of siblings and cousins and other related trolls, and they had gotten to work covering the cottage in flowers and lighting the roof with small orbs of light that floated just above the cottage in the moonlight. The newly married couple stood at the doorway, shaking as many of the little paws as they could, before Yumfuck smiled and waved to his family, signaling it was time to leave. Eric and Don watched as the trolls quickly faded into the darkness, singing as they went, filling the air with music as they closed the door gently behind them. Mara sat outside on the grounds of the 12-acre ranch, looking out over the hill country of Texas. She had taken off her shoes, and her feet were propped up in a chair. Coric had gone inside to gather up their things as Lyra took a seat next to her grandmother. Mara reached out and took her granddaughter's hand and squeezed it tight, holding her hand to her chest. "Someday, you will tell me what has put such sadness in your eyes, even as you have found such joy. It's okay, you don't need to protest. I know how you hate to lie, so I won't press you. You'll tell me when you're ready, and I'll listen, like I've always done for you. You know, I watched over you the best I could, even when I was trapped in that ugly place." Lyra winced, thinking of Osonia and looking around, wondering if the light elf who saved her could see her now. She swallowed hard, digging her nails into her palm. Mara noticed and reached over to open Lyra's hand. "Do your best not to waste the precious time you have with regrets. It helps no one. If you have to make an amends about something, do it by the way you live your life. Make it count, be happy, choose for yourself the way it should look. Trust me, I plan to do the same." "I think I can do that. I love you, Nana." "I know you do, child. I'm going to get going. I'm leaving for Virginia in the morning. Time for a new adventure of my own. Turner Underwood School is getting ready to open, and I want to be there when it does. After all, I'll be the new headmistress." I would have thought parenting me would have knocked the idea of raising a few dozen more right out of you. Mara let out a hoot of laughter and stood up. "Quite the opposite. You have always been the light of my life, along with your mother. I wouldn't have traded this adventure for anything. even the bad parts, because they all got me to this day. Come here and hug your Nana and promise to visit me often. You'll love Charlottesville. I'll teach you how to ride a horse. No thank you on the horses, but yes on the visits. Thank you for loving me and always setting such a kick-ass example. You're not the typical grandmother, you know. I'm a lot like you, Lyra, full of spit and vinegar mixed with magic. You'll see that life still has a lot of good in store for you, even as things turn darker. I know some of what happened in Paris. Lyra looked down at the ground, shutting her eyes and pressing her hand to her chest. Rumors like that travel fast through the magical community. Can't be sure what's fact and what's fiction, but it doesn't matter. What's clear is that the tipping point has been reached. Times have changed. Be careful out there while you try to hold the world together. I'm not trying to do that. Just do some good when I can with a swearing troll by my side. And a hunky light elf. That too. Smart girl. Go give them hell, Lyra Barons. Let them know there's hell to be paid. In full. Chapter 35. Hi, Karen. And hi, Tracy. Hello, Grace and Mike. And all the ships at sea. Chapter 35. Is that everything? Lyra looked back at the open door of the guest house. Cork was walking by her with the last of the boxes to the waiting U-Haul parked just in front of the bar. Her magic with parking spots was holding up for one more day. The troll was riding along in Cork's pocket, wrapped in a new pair of blue panties for the road, and the green Mustang was loaded down with snacks for the road trip. Everything was ready. That's the last of it. Yumfuck and I will be at the car. You go say goodbye to the guest house. He smiled as he turned and walked toward the gate on the side of the yard. Estelle watched from behind the bar and waved at Cork as he left, a swirl of smoke around her head. Lyra walked into the guest house and shut the door quietly behind her, standing in the room with the old couch that would still be here if she needed it. The red velvet chair was safely tucked in the U-Haul and was going with them. Thank you for being here for me. Thank you for all the memories you gave me. She walked to the window and looked out the blinds at the regulars lined up at the bar. They had already said their goodbyes at a dinner last night. Lyra had Estelle's brisket one last time and had listened as first Michael and then Paul and Cassidy and Mitzi each made long toasts. Lyra had gotten up and raised her glass to them all. Thank you for being my family when I didn't think I had one at all. I love each and every one of you and will take that love with me. Lyra turned around and walked through each room, saying goodbye as she walked out the door, leaving it ajar. Lyra! A cheer went up from the regulars as Estelle shrugged and let them do it one last time. She poured a draft and set it down in front of Craig, waving to Lyra as she left by the side gate, shutting it behind her. Lyra settled down in the front seat of the car as the troll was busy pulling open the bag of Doritos. You know the rules, said Lyra, not till we're past the city limits. We have hours of driving ahead of us before we stop for the night. Yumfuck looked up and smiled at Lyra as he ran a sharp claw down the side, opening a slit in the bag, carefully reaching in and pulling out a chip, sliding it into his open mouth. Fuck it, you're right. New rules apply. We set our own course now. Lyra started the car and pulled out into traffic. No more trying to do what everyone else thinks is right. We'll figure it out as we go. Cork cracked the window and sat back. I told Turner I was setting out on my own as the fixer. Lyra looked over at Cork. How'd he take that? He said it was time. Every fixer makes their own break and eventually has to find their own way. Louis is already in Georgetown, setting up the command center. He said the equipment was cutting edge. I made him swear he wouldn't sell off parts of it. I have to help pair him. I know, and we will, together. We got someone out of the world in between before. We'll find a way to do it again. The Dark families are not going to give up either, especially since their project turned on them, and Lucius is still out there. Cork, there's time. We'll face all of it and figure out the rules as we go. Rewriting justice, that's what you called it. Till we get it right. Lyra drove past the sign marking the border of Travis County and blew the horn, opening her window and yelling as loud as she could, Aloha, motherfuckers, it's been real. She put her arm out the window, making the UT sign for hook 'em horns, as Yumfuck pulled open the Twizzlers, biting off the end. Yum. Fuck. Road trip! Cork let out a loud whoop and settled back for the long ride, wondering just what awaited them. The world has changed. I hope we're ready for it. That's actually the end of the book. We reached the end of Guardians of Magic, so we'll start a new book tomorrow on Friday. I'll talk to Grace about the voting. But that is it for Guardians of Magic. That was a good one. Good choice, everybody. And sorry about the clearing of the throat. That is actually allergies. I think we've all forgotten that allergies exist right at the moment, but they're still out there. I hope everyone has a good Thursday, and find some joy in the day. I'm going to go back to work for a little while, but I'll find something fun to do today too. And I will talk to you all tomorrow, same time. I love you all, and I'll see you later.